Tonight we journey once more into Middle-earth, to a time of new beginnings and lingering shadows. The Great War is over, but not all is at peace. In the ruins of Fornost, whispers tell of a lost Palantír, a seeing stone shattered long ago to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. If it still exists, it could aid in rebuilding the North or awaken dangers long thought buried. King Aragorn has sent a ranger and his companions to uncover the truth. A dwarf prince seeking glory, an elf who knows the secrets of the past, a shield maiden far from home, and a man whose past is shrouded in mystery. Together, they journey into the forgotten lands of Arnor, where the past still lingers and darkness is never truly gone. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the story unfold. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift into the world of Middle-earth. The journey is about to begin. In the 15th year of the Fourth Age, when the White Tree of Gondor had grown tall and strong in the court of the Fountain, and the reunited kingdom flourished under the rule of King Elisar, strange whispers began to emerge from the northern lands. Tales of eerie lights dancing among the ruins of Fornost, the ancient capital of Arnor, reached the ears of the king. Though peace had settled across much of Middle-earth following the War of the Ring, Aragorn knew well that evil, though diminished, had not been completely vanquished from the world. The king sat in his private study in Minas Tirith, examining ancient scrolls recently discovered in the city's archives. These texts spoke of 7 seeing stones, the Palantír, brought to Middle-earth by Elendil from Númenor before its downfall. 3 had been placed in the northern kingdom of Arnor, but their fates remained largely unknown after the kingdom's collapse. 1 had been recovered from Orthanc, another lost in the sea with Arvedui, the last king of Arthedain. But the scrolls hinted at something unexpected. 1 of the stones of Arnor had been deliberately hidden, broken into 3 fragments to prevent its misuse when the kingdom fell. Aragorn knew that such an artifact, if found, could be a powerful tool for rebuilding the North Kingdom. Yet in the wrong hands it could also become a dangerous weapon. The memory of Denethor's madness through the Palantír of Minas Tirith was still fresh in his mind. With a sigh, the king made his decision. He would send a trusted kinsman to investigate these rumors and, if possible, recover the fragments of the lost Palantír. But this mission would require more than just the skills of the Dúnedain. It would need wisdom, strength, and courage from all the free peoples of Middle-earth. The Prancing Pony Inn bustled with activity as it had for countless years. Travelers from various lands mingled in the common room, sharing tales and ale beneath wooden beams darkened by decades of pipe smoke. In a private corner sat Alderon, a tall man with the weathered features of the Rangers of the North. His dark hair was streaked with grey, and his keen grey eyes watched the door with patient vigilance. He had been waiting for 3 days as instructed by his kinsman and king. The message had been clear: gather those summoned to Bree and prepare for a journey northward. The nature of their mission would be revealed only when all were present. The door to the inn swung open, admitting a gust of autumn air and a stout figure who had to duck to enter. Despite his modest height, there was nothing small about the presence of Durin VII, son of Thorin III Stonehelm, king under the mountain. The young dwarf prince strode into the common room with the confidence of his lineage, his dark beard braided with silver threads, his traveling clothes of fine make but practical design. Alderon raised a hand in greeting, and the dwarf approached, recognition flickering in his eyes. You must be the ranger, Durin said without preamble, his voice deep and resonant. My father received King Elisar's message. I am sent to represent the folk of Erebor. Welcome, Prince Durin, Alderon replied, gesturing to an empty chair. We await 2 more before our company is complete. They did not wait long. Within the hour, the door opened again to admit an elf maiden whose presence seemed to quiet the room momentarily. Nimrodel of Rivendell moved with the fluid grace of her kind, her ageless face framed by hair the color of autumn leaves. Though many of her people had departed for the undying lands, she had chosen to remain, dedicated to preserving the knowledge of the elder days. The sons of Elvron send their greetings, she said as she joined them, her voice melodious yet formal. I come in their stead as they prepare for their own journey westward. The final member of their gathering arrived as night fell, a broad-shouldered woman in the riding gear of Rohan, her golden hair bound in a practical braid. Haleth, shield maiden and emissary of King Eomer, carried herself with the proud bearing of the Rohirrim. The mark answers the call of Gondor, she stated simply, taking her seat at the table. Alderon was about to begin explaining their purpose when a 5th figure approached, a man of middle years with the practical attire of a merchant, though something in his bearing suggested he was more than he appeared. Forgive my intrusion, the man said with a slight bow. I am Brandir, a trader of Bree. I could not help but notice your gathering, and I believe I may have information of value to your quest. Alderon's hand moved subtly toward his sword. What makes you think we are on a quest, merchant? Brandir smiled, pulling back his sleeve to reveal a silver bracelet marked with the emblem of the White Tree. Because I too serve the king, though in less obvious ways. His Majesty suggested I might make myself useful to you. The ranger studied him for a moment before nodding. Then join us, for we have much to discuss. When they were settled, Alderon unfolded a map of the northern lands and began to speak in a low voice. Strange lights have been seen in the ruins of Fornost, the ancient capital of Arnor. The king believes these may be connected to rumors of a lost Palantír, one of the seeing stones brought from Númenor by Elendil. If such an artifact exists and could be recovered, it would be invaluable in rebuilding the North Kingdom. The Palantír are dangerous tools, Nimrodel cautioned. They have brought madness and despair to those who used them unwisely. Indeed, Alderon agreed. But in the hands of the rightful king, such a stone could be a powerful force for good. The ancient texts speak of a stone that was deliberately hidden and broken into 3 fragments when Arnor fell, to prevent its capture by the forces of Angmar. And you believe these fragments can be found? Durin asked, his interest clearly piqued by the mention of ancient treasures. The king has reason to believe so, but we are not the only ones searching. There are reports of strangers in the northern lands, men with pale faces and cold eyes who ask questions about the old ruins and ancient artifacts. Remnants of the enemy's servants, Haleth suggested grimly. Perhaps, Alderon replied, or something else entirely. Our task is to find the fragments of the Palantír before they do, and to discover who these strangers are and what they intend. Brandir, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. I have heard whispers among the travelers who pass through Bree. They speak of a man who calls himself the heir of Angmar, who promises power to those who follow him. A heavy silence fell over the table at the mention of Angmar, the evil realm that had destroyed the northern kingdom centuries ago. Then our path is clear, Alderon said finally. We journey to Fornost, where the first fragment is believed to be hidden. From there we follow whatever trail we find. As the companions discussed preparations for their journey, none noticed the hooded figure sitting alone in the darkest corner of the inn, listening intently to every word. dawn broke cold and clear as the company departed from Bree, heading north along the Great East Road. Alderaan led the way, his ranger's instincts alert to any sign of danger. Behind him rode Haleth on her heroic steed, followed by Durin on a sturdy pony. Nimrodel and Brandir brought up the rear, the elf maiden moving with silent grace, the merchant scanning the horizon with the practiced eye of one accustomed to watching for bandits. The journey would take them through lands that had once been part of the proud kingdom of Arnor but now lay largely empty save for scattered settlements of men. The shadow of Angmar's ancient malice still seemed to linger over these northern realms, though the Witch King himself had fallen at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. "Tell me of these fragments," Durin said as they rode, breaking the contemplative silence that had fallen over the group. "How came a Palantír to be broken? I thought they were crafted by the Eldar in Valinor beyond the skill of any to unmake." "Not broken by craft but by design," Nimrodel replied. "The lore of Rivendell speaks of Arvelig II, one of the last kings of Arthedain, who foresaw the fall of his realm. Rather than allow the Seeing Stone to fall into enemy hands, he devised a method to separate its essence into 3 vessels, each holding a portion of its power." "A wise precaution," Haleth commented, "though I wonder why he did not simply take it with him when he fled. The Palantír are bound to the land in ways we do not fully understand," Alderaan explained, and Arvelig hoped that one day when Arnor rose again the stone could be restored. He left clues to the fragments' locations in the archives of Fornost, hidden where only those of Númenórean blood might find them. "And these strangers who seek the stone, what do we know of them?" Brandir asked. Alderaan's expression darkened. "Little enough, but the king fears they may be led by one who has studied the dark arts of Angmar. The Witch King left many evil things behind when he departed the north, grimoires of forbidden knowledge, artifacts of malevolent power. Then we must be vigilant," Durin declared, his hand moving to the axe at his belt. "The dwarves have not forgotten how to fight the servants of darkness." Their journey continued for several days, the landscape gradually changing from the rolling hills of Breeland to the more rugged terrain of the ancient realm of Arthedain. On the evening of the 4th day they made camp in the shadow of Weathertop, the ruined watchtower of Amansul where Frodo Baggins had been wounded by a Morgul blade during the War of the Ring. As they sat around the campfire, Nimrodel sang softly in the Elvish tongue, a melody that seemed to hold the encroaching darkness at bay. When she finished, a contemplative silence fell over the group. "I have traveled these lands for many years," Alderaan said finally, "but never have I felt such unease as I do now. It is as though the very air watches us." "I feel it too," Haleth agreed, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, like eyes in the darkness. Brandir, who had been unusually quiet throughout the day, suddenly spoke. "There is something I must tell you all. I did not come on this journey merely at the king's suggestion. I have personal reasons for seeking the Palantír." All eyes turned to the merchant whose face was half illuminated by the flickering firelight. "My true name is Brandir of Cardolan," he continued. "My ancestors were lords of that realm before it fell to Angmar. For generations my family has passed down a secret that we were entrusted with knowledge of the Palantír's fragments by King Arvelig himself. You have kept this hidden until now?" Durin demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. "I needed to be certain of you all," Brandir replied calmly. "The knowledge I possess has cost many of my forebears their lives. The servants of Angmar have hunted my bloodline for centuries seeking what we know." "And what exactly do you know?" Alderaan asked, his expression guarded. I know that the first fragment lies not in Fornost itself but in the barrow of Arvelig on the North Downs. I know that the second is hidden beneath the waters of Lake Evendim, near the ruins of Annúminas, and I know that the third was taken eastward to a treasury in the Weather Hills. Why did you not share this with the king? Nimrodel questioned, her ageless eyes studying the man intently. Because there is more at stake than just the Palantír, Brandur answered. The fragments are keys, not just to the Seeing Stone's power, but to something greater. Something that Arvelig hid away when he realized Arthedain would fall. What could be more valuable than a Palantír? Harleth wondered aloud. Brandur's voice dropped to a whisper. The crown of Arnor, forged by Elendil himself, containing a shard of the Silmaril that his father Arendil bore into the heavens. A stunned silence followed this revelation. If true, such an artifact would be beyond price, a relic of the First Age, when the light of the two trees still shone in the Silmarils. That is impossible, Numardel said finally. The Silmarils are gone from the world, one in the sky, one in the depths of the sea, one in the fires of the earth. Not gone entirely, Brandur insisted. When Arendil's ship was hallowed by the Valar and set to sail the skies, a small fragment of the jewel fell to earth. It was found by Elendil and set into the crown of the North Kingdom as a symbol of hope and light against darkness. Before anyone could respond to this extraordinary claim, Durin suddenly raised his hand for silence. We are not alone, he whispered, his keen dwarven senses detecting what the others had missed. In the next instant, the night erupted into chaos. Dark figures swarmed from the shadows surrounding their camp, cloaked in black and wielding curved blades that gleamed dully in the firelight. The company sprang to their feet, weapons drawn, as their attackers closed in. Aldarin moved with the fluid grace of one trained in the fighting arts of the Dunedain, his sword flashing as he parried a thrust and countered with a lethal strike. Beside him, Harleth fought with the fierce skill of the Rohirrim, her blade singing through the air as she cut down one attacker after another. Durin roared a dwarven battle cry as he swung his axe in deadly arcs, the weapon's heavy head cleaving through armor and flesh with equal ease. Nimardel stood back to back with Brandur, the elf maiden, wielding a slender blade with deadly precision, while the merchant defended himself with surprising skill for one of his supposed profession. The battle was brief but intense. When it ended, a dozen black-clad figures lay dead around the campsite, while the companions stood breathless but victorious. Easterlings, Aldarin said grimly, examining one of the fallen, but not like any I have seen before. These bear the mark of the iron crown upon their armor, the emblem of Angmar. Nimardel confirmed, her face grave. It seems the rumors of the heir are not merely rumors after all. They knew we were coming, Harleth observed, cleaning her blade. Someone has betrayed our purpose. All eyes turned to Brandur, who met their gazes steadily. If I meant you harm, I would hardly have fought at your side, he pointed out reasonably. Besides, I have as much to lose as any if the servants of Angmar find the Palantír first. He speaks truly, Nimrodel said after a moment, her elven senses perceiving more than mere words could convey. But the question remains, how did our enemies know of our journey? The prancing pony has many ears, Aldarin suggested. We were not as discreet as we might have been. Whatever the case, we cannot linger here, Durin declared, already gathering his belongings. These may have been scouts. More could be on their way. With grim efficiency, the companions broke camp and continued their journey under the cover of darkness. The attack had changed something fundamental in their quest. What had begun as a search for a lost artifact had become a race against a resurgent evil, one that threatened to undo the hard-won peace of the Fourth Age. As they rode north toward the ruins of Fornost, each was lost in their own thoughts. For Alderaan, it was concern for the mission entrusted to him by his king. For Harleth, it was determination to prove the valor of Rohan in this new alliance. Durin contemplated the glory that might come to his people if they helped recover such treasures, while Nimrodell's thoughts turned to the ancient days and the terrible power of the Silmarils. And Brandir, riding at the rear of the company, touched a small amulet hidden beneath his tunic, an heirloom of his house passed down through generations. In the darkness, it seemed to pulse with a faint silvery light. Fornost Arain, the ancient capital of Arnor, stood silent and desolate upon the North Downs, its broken towers reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Once called the Norbury of the Kings, it had been abandoned for nearly 1,000 years, ever since the forces of Angmar overran the North Kingdom. Now it was a place of ghosts and memories avoided by all save the most desperate or foolhardy. The company approached the ruins cautiously, leading their horses through the tall grass that had reclaimed what once had been the main road into the city. A chill wind blew from the north, carrying with it the first hint of winter and something else, a sense of watchfulness that made the hairs on the back of Alderon's neck stand on end. "There is old power here," Nimrodell murmured, her elven senses perceiving what the others could only feel as vague unease. "Not all evil, but waiting. The stones remember the kings who walked here, and the blood that was spilled when they fell," Durin added grimly, his hand never straying far from his axe. They made their way through the outer ring of ruins, collapsed houses and shops that had once formed the vibrant heart of the capital. At the center of the city rose a hill crowned with the remains of the royal citadel, its once proud walls now reduced to weathered stumps of stone. According to the ancient records, the king's tower stood there, Alderon said, pointing to a particularly tall ruin at the center of the citadel. "If Arvalig left any clues about the Palantír, that is where we should begin our search." As they climbed the winding path to the citadel, Brandir suddenly froze, his head tilted as though listening. "We are not alone," he whispered. "There are others in the ruins." No sooner had he spoken than a figure stepped out from behind a broken column ahead of them. A tall man clad in dark robes embroidered with silver threads that caught the pale sunlight. His face was noble but cold, with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom and malice of many lifetimes. "Welcome to Fornost," the stranger said, his voice cultured and melodious yet somehow chilling. "I have been expecting you." Alderon's sword was in his hand before the last word had left the stranger's lips. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man smiled, showing teeth that seemed too white, too perfect. "I am Morgorath, last disciple of the Witch King of Angmar, and rightful heir to his domain. And you are trespassers in my kingdom. These lands belong to the reunited kingdom under King Elisar," Haleth declared boldly, her own weapon drawn. "Your claims hold no weight." Morgorath's smile did not waver. "The upstart from the south may call himself king, but the north remembers its true masters. For centuries I have waited in the shadows, gathering strength and knowledge. Now the time has come to reclaim what was lost." "You seek the Palantír," Nimrodell stated, her ageless eyes studying the man with evident distaste. "Among other things," Morgorath acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. "The Seeing Stone is but one piece of a greater puzzle, a key to power beyond your imagining. The crown of Arnor," Brandir said quietly. "That is what you truly seek." For the first time, surprise flickered across Morgorath's face. You are well informed, merchant, or should I say, last son of Cardolan. Yes, the crown is my ultimate prize. With it, I shall unite the scattered remnants of Angmar and forge a new kingdom in the north, one that will eclipse even the glory of Gondor. We will not allow it, Aldurin stated firmly, stepping forward with his sword raised. Surrender now, or face the justice of the king. Morgorath laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally among the ruins. You are brave but foolish, Ranger. Do you think I would confront you alone? Morgorath raised his hand, and suddenly the ruins around them came alive with movement. Dozens of dark-clad warriors emerged from hiding places among the broken stones, their weapons drawn, and faces grim beneath hoods of black cloth. You see, Morgorath continued, his voice carrying a note of triumph, I have spent centuries preparing for this moment. The servants of Angmar never truly disappeared. They merely waited, as I waited, for the right time to return. Aldurin assessed their situation with the quick eye of a veteran ranger. They were outnumbered at least 5 to 1, surrounded on all sides by warriors whose bearing spoke of skill and discipline. We need not be enemies, Morgorath said, his tone suddenly reasonable. Hold, join me, and share in the power that will soon be mine. The North Kingdom will rise again, greater than before, under the banner of Angmar. Nimrodel replied scornfully, that is not restoration but corruption. Morgorath's face hardened. Then you have made your choice. He turned to his warriors. Take them alive if possible. The Ranger and the son of Cardolan especially, they may have knowledge we need. What followed was chaos. The companions formed a defensive circle, backs to each other as they faced the oncoming assault. Durin roared a dwarven battle cry that echoed off the ancient stones, his axe cleaving through the first attackers to reach him. Haleth fought with the disciplined fury of the Rohirrim, her sword a blur of deadly motion. Nimrodel's elven blade flashed with an inner light as it cut through the enemy ranks, while Brandir proved himself far more than a simple merchant, wielding a short sword with the skill of one trained in the fighting arts of Numenor. Aldurin found himself facing Morgorath directly, the sorcerer drawing a long pale blade that seemed to drink in the light around it. They circled each other amidst the battle, two masters of their respective arts measuring the other's strengths and weaknesses. You fight well, Ranger, Morgorath acknowledged as their blades met in a shower of sparks. But you cannot win. The power of Angmar flows through me, power your kind has forgotten. We have not forgotten, Aldurin replied grimly, parrying a vicious thrust and countering with a slash that Morgorath barely avoided. We have chosen to reject it. Their duel continued, while around them the battle raged. Despite their skill and courage, the companions found themselves slowly being pushed back toward the crumbling edge of the citadel. Below lay a sheer drop to the lower city, a fall that none would survive. It was Nimrodel who changed the tide of battle. Seeing their desperate situation, she began to sing in the ancient tongue of the Eldar, a song of power that had not been heard in Middle-earth since the Elder days. The very stones of Fornost seemed to respond, trembling beneath their feet as memories of their former glory stirred within them. The warriors of Angmar faltered, their advance checked by a sudden fear that gripped their hearts. In that moment of hesitation, Durin saw their opportunity. The tower, he shouted, pointing to the ruins of the king's tower that stood nearby. We can hold them off there. The companions fought their way toward the tower, cutting through the disorganized ranks of their enemies. Morgorath, seeing his advantage slipping away, abandoned his duel with Aldurin and raised his hands, dark energy crackling between his fingers. "You will not escape me so easily," he snarled, unleashing a bolt of shadow that struck the ground at Alderon's feet, sending the ranger stumbling backward. But before Morgorath could press his attack, Brandir was there, interposing himself between the sorcerer and his target. The merchant's amulet suddenly blazed with silver light, and when Morgorath's next spell struck him, it seemed to dissolve harmlessly against an invisible barrier. "Go!" Brandir shouted to the others. "I will hold him off." Reluctantly, Aldaron led the rest of the company into the ruins of the tower, while Brandir faced Morgorath alone. The last they saw of the merchant, he was standing defiant before the sorcerer, his amulet shining like a star in the gathering darkness. Inside the tower, they found themselves in a vast circular chamber, its roof long since collapsed to reveal the sky above. Ancient columns supported what remained of the upper levels, and at the center of the room stood a raised dais, where once the throne of Arnor had stood. "We cannot abandon Brandir," Haleth insisted, her sword still drawn and ready. "We won't," Aldaron assured her. "But first we must find what we came for. This may be our only chance." As if in answer to his words, Nimrodel suddenly pointed to the dais. "Look there," she said softly. "The stones are marked with the emblem of the House of Elendil." They approached cautiously, and indeed, carved into the weathered stone was the symbol of the white tree surrounded by 7 stars. Durin ran his hand over the carving, his dwarven senses detecting what human eyes might miss. "There is a hidden chamber beneath," he announced. "The stone is fitted too precisely to be natural. This is dwarven craft, or I'm no son of Durin." With strength born of his heritage, the dwarf prince located and triggered a hidden mechanism. With a grinding of ancient gears, a section of the dais slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Quickly," Aldaron urged. "We do not know how long Brandir can hold them off." They descended the stairs, Durin leading the way with the confidence of one born to the underground realms. At the bottom, they found a small chamber hewn from the living rock, its walls inscribed with elvish script that glowed faintly in the darkness. "It is the record of Arvelik's last days," Nimrodel translated, her fingers tracing the luminous letters. "He foresaw the fall of Arthedain, and took measures to preserve its greatest treasures." In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and upon it rested a crystal vessel no larger than a man's fist. Within the crystal, a swirling mist of silver and blue pulsed with an inner light. "The first fragment of the Palantír," Aldaron breathed, reaching for the vessel. As his fingers closed around it, the mist within seemed to respond, swirling more rapidly and brightening until it illuminated the entire chamber. Suddenly, Aldaron's mind was filled with visions. He saw Anuminous in its glory, the shores of Lake Evendim gleaming in the sunlight. He saw the second fragment of the Palantír, hidden in a submerged chamber beneath the waters of the lake. And he saw the third fragment secured in a treasury deep within the Weather Hills, guarded by ancient enchantments. With a gasp, he released the vessel, the visions fading but the knowledge remaining. "I know where the other fragments are," he announced. "The stone has shown me." Before anyone could respond, they heard a commotion from above, the clash of steel and cries of battle. "Brandir," Haleth said grimly, "we must help him." They hurried back up the stairs, Aldaron carefully securing the crystal vessel within his cloak. When they emerged into the throne room, they found Brandir engaged in desperate combat with Morgorath's warriors, while the sorcerer himself stood back, weaving dark spells that seemed to drain the very light from the air. Seeing the companions emerge from the hidden chamber, Morgoth's eyes narrowed with understanding. "The fragment," he hissed. "Give it to me, and I will spare your lives." "Never," Alderaan replied, drawing his sword once more. What followed was a battle more desperate than the first. The companions fought with renewed purpose, knowing that they must escape with the fragment at all costs. Nimrod's song once again filled the air, strengthening their arms and hearts, while Durin and Haleth formed a protective barrier around Alderaan, who carried their precious cargo. Brandir, seeing their plan, fought his way to Morgoth himself, engaging the sorcerer in single combat to prevent him from using his dark arts against the others. "Flee while you can," he shouted to his companions. "I will find you at Lake Evendim." Alderaan hesitated, torn between their mission and loyalty to their companion. But Brandir's meaning was clear. He had heard Alderaan's words about the second fragment and understood what must be done. "Go," Brandir insisted, parrying a vicious strike from Morgoth's pale blade. "The fragment must be kept safe." With heavy hearts, the companions fought their way out of the tower and down through the ruins of Fornost. Behind them, they heard Morgoth's cry of rage as he realized his prey was escaping. But Brandir's sacrifice had given them the time they needed, and by nightfall they had left the ruins far behind, riding hard toward the west and the shores of Lake Evendim. As they made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, Alderaan carefully unwrapped the crystal vessel containing the first fragment of the Palantír. In the darkness it glowed with an inner light, pulsing like a living heart. "What did you see?" Nimrod asked quietly, her ageless eyes studying the ranger's face. "I saw the past and the future," Alderaan replied, his voice distant with memory. "I saw Arnor as it was, and as it might be again, and I saw our path forward to Lake Evendim, where the second fragment lies beneath the waters." "And Brandir?" Haleth asked, her face grim with concern for their companion. "I do not know," Alderaan admitted, "but he is more than he appears. That much is certain. If anyone can escape Morgoth's clutches, it is he." Durin, who had been keeping watch at the edge of their camp, suddenly rejoined them. "There is no sign of pursuit," he reported, "but we should not linger. The servants of Angmar will not give up so easily." As they prepared to rest, taking turns at watch through the night, each was lost in their own thoughts. They had found the first fragment of the Palantír, but at what cost? And what dangers awaited them at Lake Evendim, where the second fragment lay hidden beneath the waters? The quest had only just begun, and already the shadow of Angmar loomed over them, darker and more threatening than any had imagined. The waters of Evendim. The journey westward to Lake Evendim took them through lands that had once been the heart of Arnor, but now lay largely empty, save for the occasional ruins of what had been towns and watchtowers. They traveled swiftly but cautiously, ever watchful for signs of pursuit from Morgoth's forces. On the third day after their escape from Fornost, they crested a hill and beheld Lake Evendim spread before them, its waters gleaming like polished silver in the afternoon sun. On the northern shore stood the ruins of Anominas, the original capital of Arnor, its broken towers and fallen walls a poignant reminder of glory long faded. "It was beautiful once," Nimrod said softly, her elven memory reaching back to days when the city had stood proud and whole. The white towers reflected in the lake, banners flying in the breeze. "I visited here in the time of Elendil when the kingdom was young and full of hope, and it will be beautiful again." Aldarin replied with quiet determination. King Elisar has vowed to rebuild Anuminas and restore the North Kingdom to its former glory. If we succeed in our quest, Durin added pragmatically, that task will be made considerably easier. They made their way down to the lakeshore, approaching the ruins with caution. Unlike Fornost, which had been abandoned to the elements for a millennium, Anuminas showed signs of recent attention. Sections of wall had been cleared of debris, and scaffolding stood against one of the more intact towers. The king has already begun the work of restoration, Aldarin explained, noting their surprised expressions. Though it will take many years to complete. Where exactly did you see the fragment in your vision? Haleth asked, scanning the vast expanse of the lake. Aldarin pointed to a partially submerged structure near the eastern shore of the city. There it appears to be some kind of ceremonial bath or pool connected to the royal palace. The fragment lies in a chamber beneath the waters. Durin eyed the lake dubiously. I am a dwarf, not a fish. How do you propose we reach this underwater chamber? Before Aldarin could respond, a voice called out from behind them. Perhaps I can be of assistance. They whirled around, weapons half drawn, to find Brander standing there, looking somewhat battered but very much alive. His clothing was torn and singed in places, and a fresh cut marked his cheek, but his eyes were bright with triumph. Brander, Haleth exclaimed, her usual reserve giving way to genuine relief. How did you escape? The merchant smiled wearily. With difficulty. Morgorath is powerful, but his arrogance makes him careless. When he thought he had me cornered, I used this. He touched the silver amulet at his throat to create a diversion. While he was blinded, I made my escape through passages beneath the citadel that my ancestors once used. You know much of Fornost for a simple merchant, Nimrodel observed, though her tone held no accusation. As I told you, my family has kept the knowledge of Arnor's secrets for generations, Brander replied, including certain pathways and chambers not recorded in the common histories. Aldarin clasped the man's arm in greeting. However you managed it, we are glad to see you safe. We have found the first fragment, and I have seen visions of where the second lies beneath the waters of the lake. Brander nodded, unsurprised. The Chamber of Stars. It was built by Elendil himself as a place of meditation and communion with the Valar. When Anuminas was abandoned, the chamber was sealed and allowed to flood, protecting its treasures from those who might misuse them. You know of it? Durin asked. I know of its existence, though not its exact location, Brandir admitted. But more importantly, I know how we might reach it. He reached into his pack and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Unwrapping it, he revealed several small objects that resembled delicate silver flowers. Corala, Nimrodel breathed, recognizing them immediately. Breath flowers. They are of elven make from the First Age. Indeed, Brandir confirmed. They allow the wearer to breathe underwater for a time. My family has preserved these for centuries, knowing they might one day be needed. Where did your family acquire such treasures? Aldarin asked, his curiosity piqued by this further evidence of Brandir's unusual heritage. That is a tale for another time, Brandir replied with a slight smile. For now, let us focus on retrieving the second fragment before Morgorath and his servants catch up to us. They made camp in the shelter of a partially intact building near the lake shore, planning to attempt the underwater expedition at dawn when the light would be best for seeing beneath the surface. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch, all too aware that their enemies might not be far behind. During his watch, Aldarin found himself joined by Brandir, who seemed restless despite his evident fatigue. "There is something I have not told you," the merchant said quietly, after ensuring the others were asleep or out of earshot. "Something about the crown of Arnor that you should know." Aldarin waited silently, sensing the weight of the man's words. "The crown contains more than just a fragment of the Silmaril," Brandir continued. "It holds the power to restore or destroy the North Kingdom. Arvelig imbued it with ancient magic before he hid it away, binding it to the bloodline of Elendil. In the right hands it can heal the land and awaken the dormant power of Arnor. In the wrong hands, it could be used to corrupt and dominate." Aldarin finished grimly. "As Morgareth intends." Brandir nodded. "That is why my family has guarded its secret so jealously. We believed that one day the rightful king would return to claim it. And now, with Aragorn on the throne, the time has come." Aldarin agreed. "But Morgareth seeks to pervert this power for his own ends. He must not succeed," Brandir said, his voice hardening with resolve. "Whatever the cost, the crown must be kept from him." Dawn found them preparing for the underwater expedition. According to Brandir, the Coirella would allow them to breathe beneath the surface for approximately an hour, hopefully enough time to locate and retrieve the fragment. "Not all of us should go," Aldarin decided. "Some must remain here to guard our camp and keep watch for enemies." In the end, it was decided that Aldarin, Brandir, and Nimrodel would make the underwater journey, while Durin and Haleth remained on shore. The elven maid's knowledge of ancient structures might prove invaluable, and Brandir's familiarity with the Coirella made his presence essential. As the first rays of sunlight touched the waters of Lake Evendim, the three companions waded into the shallows. Brandir distributed the silver flowers, demonstrating how to place them over mouth and nose where they adhered gently to the skin. "Breathe normally," he instructed. "The flower will convert water to air. But remember, we have limited time." With that, they submerged themselves in the cool waters of the lake and began swimming toward the sunken chamber that Aldarin had seen in his vision. The waters of Lake Evendim were cold but clear, and as Aldarin, Brandir, and Nimrodel swam deeper, the sunlight filtered down through the blue depths in shimmering rays. They followed the contours of the submerged ruins, passing through what had once been grand archways and corridors, now home to small fish and swaying water plants. Nimrodel led the way, her elven eyes piercing the gloom more effectively than her human companions. She moved with natural grace through the water, her long hair streaming behind her like copper flame. Aldarin followed close behind, with Brandir taking up the rear, occasionally gesturing toward landmarks that matched descriptions from his ancestral lore. After several minutes of swimming, they came to what appeared to be a circular structure, its domed roof partially collapsed, but still recognizable as a temple or sacred chamber. Carved into the stone above the entrance was a symbol, 7 stars arranged in a circle around a white tree. "The Chamber of Stars," Brandir signaled with his hands, the words bubbling from his mouth through the silver flower. They swam through the entrance, pushing aside trailing water plants that had colonized the doorway. Inside, the chamber opened up into a vast circular space. The floor was inlaid with a mosaic depicting the night sky, the colored stones still vibrant despite centuries underwater. At the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, and upon it a stone pedestal. Aldarin swam toward it, his heart quickening. The pedestal was empty, but as he examined it more closely, he noticed a small indentation in its surface, a keyhole of some kind. He looked questioningly at Brandir. The merchant reached beneath his tunic and withdrew a small object, a silver key in the shape of a star. He handed it to Alderon, who carefully inserted it into the indentation and turned. There was a grinding sound that carried clearly through the water, and a section of the floor beside the pedestal slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Within it lay a crystal vessel identical to the one they had found in Fornost, containing the same swirling silver-blue mist. Alderon reached down and grasped the vessel. As his fingers closed around it, visions once again flooded his mind. He saw the weather hills rising against a stormy sky, a hidden entrance in a cliff face, a treasury filled with the forgotten wealth of Arnor, and deep within, the third fragment of the Palantír, guarded by ancient enchantments. The visions faded, and he signaled to the others that they should return to the surface. Their air would not last much longer, and they had found what they sought. The swim back seemed longer, their lungs beginning to strain against the limitations of the elven magic. But at last they broke the surface near the shore where Durin and Haleth waited anxiously. "You found it?" Haleth asked as she helped pull Nimiradel from the water. Alderon nodded, holding up the crystal vessel. "The second fragment, and I have seen where the third lies in the weather hills in a hidden treasury." "Then we have no time to lose," Durin said, scanning the horizon. "I've been watching the northern shore. Riders have been moving there, men in dark clothing. I fear Margareth's servants have found our trail." They quickly gathered their belongings and mounted their horses, setting out eastward toward the weather hills with all possible speed. The second fragment of the Palantír was secured in Alderon's saddlebag, wrapped carefully in oilcloth and bound with leather straps. As they rode, Brandir explained more of what he knew about the third fragment and the treasury that housed it. The treasury was built by Elendil himself as a safe house for the heirlooms of his line. When Arnor began to falter, more treasures were placed there for safekeeping. The entrance is hidden and warded with spells of concealment that only those of Númenórean blood can penetrate. Aladarin asked, "Is it there as well?" Brandir nodded. "According to my family's law, yes. Arvelig placed it there before his final battle, along with the third fragment of the Palantirith. Together, they are the keys to restoring the North Kingdom. If Morgareth reaches them first," Nimrodel said softly, "he could use their power to establish a new realm of darkness in the north. Then we shall not allow that to happen," Haleth declared, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. They rode hard through the day and into the evening, making camp only when the darkness made further travel dangerous. They took turns keeping watch, all too aware that their enemies might be close behind. It was during Aladarin's watch, in the quietest hour before dawn, that he first noticed the change in the crystal vessels. The two fragments they had recovered were pulsing in unison, their silvery blue light growing stronger, as if responding to something. They sensed the third fragment, Brandir said, awakening and moving to Aladarin's side. "We are drawing closer to it, or it is drawing closer to us," Aladarin replied grimly. The weather hills rose before them, a line of steep ridges running north to south along the eastern edge of the ancient realm of Arthedain. Once these hills had been dotted with watchtowers and beacons, allowing the kings of Arnor to send messages and warnings across their wide domains. Now only ruins remained, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. The companions made their way carefully along the base of the hills, following the guidance of Aldarin's visions. The landscape was rugged and desolate, with few trees for cover and many loose stones that could turn a horse's ankle if not carefully navigated. The entrance should be near, Alderan said as they approached a particularly steep cliff face. In my vision, I saw a symbol carved into the rock, a star with 7 points. They dismounted and began to search the cliff, spreading out to cover more ground. It was Durin who found it, his keen dwarven eyes spotting the faint carving almost worn away by time and weather. Though how we're to open a door in solid rock, I cannot say. The others gathered around. The carving was indeed there, a 7-pointed star etched into the stone at about the height of a man's chest. Brandir stepped forward. This is Númenórean craft. The door will respond to the blood of Elendil's line. He looked at Alderan. As a kinsman of the king, your blood should suffice. Alderan drew his dagger and without hesitation made a small cut across his palm. He pressed his bleeding hand against the carved star. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a low rumbling sound, a section of the cliff face began to move, sliding inward to reveal a dark passage beyond. Quickly, Nimrodel urged, the door may not remain open long. They hurried inside, leading their horses with them. No sooner had the last of them entered than the stone door slid shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Durin struck a light, and they found themselves in a wide corridor that sloped gently downward into the heart of the hill. The walls were smooth and precisely cut, bearing the unmistakable signs of Númenórean craftsmanship. The air is fresh, Haleth noted with surprise. There must be ventilation shafts. Elendil's people were master builders, Brandir said. This treasury was designed to preserve its contents for ages. They proceeded cautiously down the corridor, which eventually opened into a vast chamber. Their torches could not illuminate its full extent, but they could see row upon row of stone shelves and alcoves, many still holding objects that gleamed in the torchlight. Weapons, armor, jeweled coffers and artifacts of strange design. The wealth of Arnor, Nimrodel breathed, preserved all these centuries. Alderan felt the crystal vessels in his pack pulse more strongly. The third fragment is here, and I believe I know where. He led them through the treasury to its far end, where a raised platform supported what could only be described as a throne, not ornate or grand, but simple and dignified, carved from a single block of white stone. Behind it stood a pedestal similar to those they had found in Fornost and beneath Lake Evendim. And upon this pedestal rested the third crystal vessel, its contents swirling with the same silver-blue mist as the others. The three were separated to prevent their misuse, Brandir explained as they approached, but they were meant to be reunited when the time was right. Alderan reached for the third fragment, but as his fingers touched the crystal, a voice spoke from the shadows behind them. I must thank you for leading me here. I could not have found it without you. They whirled around to see Morgoth standing at the entrance to the chamber, flanked by a dozen of his dark-clad warriors. The sorcerer looked much as he had in Fornost, tall and gaunt, with eyes that held the cold wisdom of centuries. But now he wore a cruel smile of triumph. Did you think you had escaped me? He asked, stepping forward. I have followed your every move since Fornost. The son of Cardolan was not the only one with knowledge passed down through generations. You cannot wield the power of the Palantír, Nimrodel said defiantly. It responds only to those of pure heart and noble intent. Morgoth laughed. Noble intent? Was it noble intent that led Isildur to keep the One Ring? Was it pure heart that drove the stewards of Gondor to claim the rule that was not rightfully theirs? Do not speak to me of nobility, elf maiden. I seek only to restore what was lost, to rebuild the North Kingdom under strong rule. Under the banner of Angmar, Alderaan said, under the shadow of darkness. Call it what you will, Morgorath replied with a dismissive wave. Now give me the fragments you carry, and I may yet spare your lives. Durin hefted his axe. You'll have nothing from us, sorcerer, save the taste of dwarven steel. So be it, Morgorath sighed. He raised his hand and his warriors surged forward. The battle was joined in the ancient treasury, the clash of weapons echoing off the stone walls. Durin and Haleth met the attackers head-on, while Nimrodel used her elven blade with deadly precision. Alderaan found himself once again facing Morgorath directly, their swords meeting in a shower of sparks. Brandir, meanwhile, had slipped behind the throne and was examining the wall behind it. His fingers traced patterns in the stone that others might have missed, Númenórean runes that spoke of hidden chambers and secret ways. As the battle raged, Alderaan was driven back toward the pedestal where the third fragment rested. Seeing an opportunity, he seized it, feeling the now familiar rush of visions flood his mind. But this time something was different. With all three fragments in proximity, the visions were stronger, more coherent. He saw a hidden chamber beneath the throne, and within it a crown, not ornate or jewel-encrusted, but a simple circlet of silver with a small clear gem set in its center. The crown of Arnor with its shard of the Silmaril, and he saw how the three fragments of the Palantír could be reunited. Brandir, he called out. The throne. Look beneath the throne. The merchant understood immediately. He pressed a series of hidden catches in the stone, and with a grinding sound the throne began to move, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Morgorath's eyes widened. The crown, he breathed. At last, with a surge of dark energy, he hurled Alderaan aside and rushed toward the opening. But Nimrodel was faster, interposing herself between the sorcerer and his prize. You shall not pass, she declared, her elven blade glowing with an inner light. What followed was a duel of both blade and sorcery. Morgorath's dark powers clashed with Nimrodel's elven magic, while around them the battle continued to rage. Durind and Haleth were holding their own against the warriors of Angmar, but they were outnumbered and gradually being pushed back. Adaran recovered his footing and joined Nimrodel in confronting Morgorath. Together they forced the sorcerer away from the hidden staircase. Brandir, go, Alderaan shouted. Find the crown. The merchant hesitated only a moment before descending the stairs, disappearing into the darkness below. The battle seemed to last for hours, though it was likely only minutes. Morgorath's warriors were skilled and determined, but the companions fought with the desperation of those who knew the fate of kingdoms hung in the balance. Then, just as their strength was beginning to fail, a brilliant light erupted from the staircase beneath the throne. It was a pure silver-white radiance that filled the chamber, causing Morgorath and his servants to cry out and shield their eyes. Brandir emerged from the staircase holding aloft the crown of Arnor. The small gem set in its center, the shard of the Silmaril, blazed with the light of the two trees of Valinor, a light not seen in Middle-earth since the Elder Days. The light of the Silmaril, Nimrodel gasped. It burns away falsehood and darkness. Morgorath's warriors fell back, unable to bear the radiance. The sorcerer himself stood his ground, though his face contorted with pain. Give me the crown, he demanded, his voice strained. It is my right. It belongs to the king, Brandir replied calmly, and you are not he. Alderaan stepped forward, the three crystal vessels containing the fragments of the Palantír clutched in his hands. In the light of the Silmaril, he could see how they were meant to be joined, not physically broken, but separated in essence, each vessel containing a portion of the Seeing Stone's power. He brought them together, and with a flash of blue light, the three vessels merged into one. The Palantír of Arnor was whole once more, a perfect sphere of crystal, within which swirled clouds of silver and blue. "No," Morgorath cried, lunging forward in desperation. But the light of the Silmaril flared even brighter, and the sorcerer was thrown backward, his dark powers seeming to wither in the face of that ancient radiance. "Flee while you can," Alderaan told him. "Return to the shadows from whence you came." For a moment it seemed Morgorath might continue to fight, but then, with a snarl of hatred, he turned and fled, his remaining warriors following close behind. The companions stood in silence for a moment, scarcely believing their victory. Durin leaned on his axe, breathing heavily. Halath wiped blood from a cut on her cheek. Nimrodal's face was serene but weary. Brandir approached Alderaan and held out the crown of Arnor. "It should be you who returns this to the king," he said. "You, his kinsman." Alderaan shook his head. "We shall return it together. All of us have played a part in this quest." He looked down at the Palantír in his hands. Within its depths he could see glimpses of distant places, Minas Tirith, with its white towers, the grey havens where elven ships departed for the undying lands, and Anúminas where King Elessar had begun the work of rebuilding. "With these," he said, gesturing to the Palantír and the crown, "the North Kingdom will rise again. Arnor will be restored, and the reunited kingdom will enter a new age of peace and prosperity. Then let us waste no time," Halath said practically. "We have a long journey ahead of us." They gathered what supplies they could from the treasury, taking only what they needed for their journey, and a few small artifacts that might be of particular significance to the king. The rest would remain here, preserved until Elessar could send a proper expedition to recover the wealth of his ancestors. As they prepared to leave, Brandir paused by the throne, running his hand along its smooth white stone. "My family has guarded the secret of this place for generations," he said quietly. "I never truly believed I would see it with my own eyes, much less play a part in fulfilling the ancient prophecy. Your family has served the North Kingdom well," Alderaan told him. "When we return to Anúminas, I will ensure that King Elessar knows of your loyalty. That would be reward enough. But come, as the Shield Maiden says, we have a long journey ahead." They made their way back through the treasury and up the corridor to the hidden entrance. As they emerged into the sunlight, they saw no sign of Morgorath or his servants. Whether the sorcerer had truly fled or was merely regrouping, they could not say. But for now, at least, they had won a great victory. With the Palantír of Arnor restored and the crown of Elendil recovered, they turned their horses westward toward Anúminas and the king. The quest that had begun with whispers of strange lights in the ruins of Fornost was nearing its end, and the future of the North Kingdom of all Middle-earth seemed brighter than it had in many long years. As they rode, Alderaan glanced back at the weather hills receding behind them. For a moment he thought he saw a pale figure watching from a distant ridge, Morgorath perhaps, or some servant of the sorcerer. But when he looked again, there was nothing there save the wind moving through the grass. The shadow of Angmar had been driven back once more. But Alderaan knew well that darkness never truly vanished from the world. It merely retreated, waiting for another opportunity to return. That was why the vigilance of the Dunedain, of all the free peoples of Middle-earth, could never falter. For now, though, they had won the day. And that was enough. The journey back to Anúminas took them many days. following the course of the Brandywine River southward before turning west toward Lake Evendim. They traveled cautiously, ever watchful for signs of pursuit, but it seemed that Morgorath's forces had indeed scattered after their defeat in the Weather Hills. As they rode, they spoke of what they had seen and done, and of what might lie ahead. Durin expressed his eagerness to return to Erebor and tell his people of the wonders he had witnessed. Haleth spoke of Rohan and the messages she would carry back to King Elmer about the restoration of the North Kingdom. Nimrodel was more reserved, her thoughts turning increasingly to the Grey Havens and the sea beyond, though she did not speak of this to her companions. Brandir, for his part, seemed content simply to be part of the company, as though the fulfillment of his family's long vigil had left him at peace with whatever might come next. Alderar's thoughts were on the king and the momentous news they carried. The restoration of the Palantír of Arnor would allow Elisar to communicate more easily with the southern kingdom of Gondor, strengthening the bonds of the reunited kingdom. And the crown of Arnor, with its shard of the Silmaril, would serve as a powerful symbol of the rebirth of the North. It was late afternoon when they finally came within sight of Anaminas. The city was still largely in ruins, but signs of renewal were everywhere, scaffolding around partially restored towers, new stonework gleaming amid the old, and the banners of the king flying proudly from those structures that had been completed. As they approached the gates, they were met by a company of guards wearing the livery of the king. The white tree of Gondor surmounted by the 7 stars and crown of Arnor. "Hail, Alderon of the Dunedain," the captain of the guard called out. "Word of your coming has preceded you." Alderon raised an eyebrow in surprise. "How could that be?" The captain smiled. "The king saw you in the Palantír of Minas Tirith. He awaits you in the Hall of Kings." They were escorted through the city, drawing curious glances from the workers and settlers who were helping to rebuild Anaminas. Many were Dunedain from the scattered settlements of the north, but there were also men from Gondor, dwarves from the Blue Mountains, and even a few elves who had chosen to remain in Middle-earth a while longer. The Hall of Kings was one of the first structures to be fully restored. A long vaulted chamber with high windows that filled the space with light. At its far end stood a simple throne of white stone, and upon it sat Aragorn Elisar, king of the reunited kingdom. Though he wore the crown and robes of his office, there was still something of the ranger about him, a watchfulness in his grey eyes, a readiness in his posture. As the companions approached, the king rose to greet them. "Welcome, my friends," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "You have done what many thought impossible." Aldarin knelt before his kinsman and king, the others following suit. "My lord, we bring you the treasures of Arnor the Palantír, restored to wholeness, and the crown of Elendil, preserved through the ages." He presented the seeing stone first, a perfect sphere of crystal within which swirled clouds of silver and blue. Aragorn received it with reverence, holding it carefully in both hands. "The Palantír of Anaminas," he said softly, "not seen in Middle-earth since Arvedui was lost in the Bay of Foreshal. With this, the bonds between North and South will be strengthened, and the work of rebuilding Arnor made easier." Next, Brandir stepped forward and presented the crown of Arnor. In the light of the hall, the shard of the Silmaril set in its center gleamed with an inner radiance, casting prismatic reflections on the walls around them. "The crown of Elendil," Aragorn breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "I had thought it lost forever." It was hidden in the treasury of Elendel in the Weather Hills, Brandir explained. My ancestors were entrusted with its secret by King Arveleg himself. The king studied Brandir with new interest. You are of the line of Cardolan then? Few remain of that bloodline. Yes, my lord. My family has kept the knowledge of Arnor's treasures through the generations, waiting for the day when the rightful king would return. Aragorn nodded, his expression solemn. Your loyalty shall be rewarded, Brandir of Cardolan. The North Kingdom will have need of men like you in the days to come. He turned to address all the companions. You have each played a vital role in this quest. Durin, son of Thorin, your courage honors your father and your people. Haleth of Rohan, your valor proves that the alliance between our kingdoms remains strong. Nimmeradel of Rivendell, your wisdom and knowledge have been invaluable. And Aldurin, my kinsman, you have led this company with the skill and judgment befitting your lineage. The king placed the Palantír and crown on a table beside the throne. Tonight we shall feast in your honor. Tomorrow we will discuss what is to be done with these treasures and how best to continue the rebuilding of Anaminas. The feast that night was held in a great pavilion erected in what had once been the main square of Anaminas. The workers and soldiers who were helping to rebuild the city joined in the celebration, and tales of the companions' quest were told and retold, growing perhaps a little in the telling. As the night wore on, Aldurin found himself standing at the edge of the gathering, looking out over Lake Evendim. The waters were calm, reflecting the stars above like a perfect mirror. It is beautiful, is it not? Aragorn said, joining him. When I was a young man in Rivendell, I often dreamed of seeing Anaminas restored. Now that dream is becoming reality. Thanks to you, my lord, Aldurin replied. It was your vision that set this work in motion. The king smiled. And your courage that helped make it possible. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Tell me of Morgareth. Do you believe he will return? Aldurin considered the question carefully. I do not know. The light of the Silmaril seemed to weaken him greatly, but evil such as his is not easily destroyed. I fear we have not seen the last of him. Then we must be vigilant, Aragorn said. The North Kingdom is still vulnerable, and there are many who would see it fall before it can rise again. They stood in silence for a time, each lost in his own thoughts. Then the king spoke again, his voice soft but determined. With the Palantír restored and the crown of Elendel recovered, we have taken a great step toward rebuilding what was lost. Anúminas will shine again as it did in the days of old, a beacon of hope and strength in the north. Aldurin nodded, feeling a sense of pride and purpose that he had not known before. The quest had changed him, as it had changed all of them. They had faced darkness and emerged victorious, carrying with them treasures beyond price and memories that would last a lifetime. As they returned to the feast, Aldurin glanced back at the lake one last time. For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of movement on the far shore, a pale figure watching from the shadows. But when he looked again, there was nothing there save the wind moving through the reeds. The shadow of Angmar had been driven back but not destroyed. That was a task for another day and perhaps another hero. For now it was enough to celebrate their victory and look toward the future with hope. 1 year later, Anúminas had been transformed. The ruined city that had stood abandoned for nearly 2 millennia was now a bustling center of activity, with new buildings rising alongside carefully restored ancient structures. The waters of Lake Evendim lapped at rebuilt quays where ships from all parts of the reunited kingdom docked, bringing supplies, workers and settlers eager to be part of the North Kingdom's rebirth. At the center of it all stood the restored Tower of the West, gleaming white in the sunlight. From its highest chamber, the Palantír of Anúminos allowed King Elisar to communicate with his stewards in Minas Tirith, strengthening the bonds between North and South. And upon a special pedestal in the Hall of Kings rested the crown of Arnor, the shard of the Silmaril set within it, shining with a light that seemed to drive back shadows and bring hope to all who beheld it. The companions who had recovered these treasures had gone their separate ways, though they remained bound by the friendship forged during their quest. Durin had returned to Erebor, bearing gifts from the treasury of Elendil that had once been crafted by his ancestors. Haleth had journeyed back to Rohan, where she now served as a special envoy between the Mark and the North Kingdom. Nimrodel had departed for the Grey Havens, though whether she had sailed west or remained in Middle-earth, none could say with certainty. Brandir had accepted King Elisar's offer to become the keeper of the treasury, tasked with cataloguing and preserving the ancient artifacts of Arnor. His knowledge of the North Kingdom's history made him uniquely suited to this role, and he found great satisfaction in seeing the treasures of his ancestors properly honored. And Aldaran had been appointed captain of the Northern Guard, responsible for the security of Anúminos and the surrounding lands. It was a position of great honor and responsibility, one that he approached with the same dedication and courage he had shown during the quest for the Palantír. On this particular day, Aldaran stood on the battlements of the city, looking out over Lake Evendim. The autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water and turning the sky to gold and crimson. As darkness fell, the light of the Silmaril in the crown of Arnor became visible even from this distance, shining from the windows of the Hall of Kings like a star brought down to earth. It was a reminder of what had been accomplished and what remained to be done, for though the North Kingdom was rising again, there were still shadows in the world that sought to oppose it.